What's up everybody, welcome back to the channel and another Outriders video. Not a build video today, but a case study in trying to figure out which one of the two core activities, whether it's Trials of Tarya Gratar or Expeditions, are actually the most beneficial or most efficient in terms of things like anomaly extract, drop pod resources, titanium farming, general item farming, apocalypse gear, everything like that. So the idea would be in today's video that what we're going to do is we're going to try and compare these two activities with each other. We're going to use an hour of each as a case study to sort of compare against each other, and we're going to figure out which one is most beneficial to us as players. So first and foremost, the build that I use to test both Trials of Tarya Gratar as well as Expeditions is Eruption Pyromancer. I think this build straddles the line between being equally good at dealing a lot of boss damage while also being able to deal a lot of damage to groups of enemies, aka large rooms which don't necessarily have a red bar or champions, anything like that, but just a whole bunch of small trash enemies running at you and having to kill them as efficient as possible. Now, I definitely think that, and I'm going to say this a lot as we go through the different parameters and the things that I chose for doing this testing, is that of course, depending on what you use to test Trials of Tarya Gratar and Expeditions and all of that, the point is that there's a lot of variables that can affect the results that we get from this. And if you, for instance, are playing a character class that is exceptionally good at killing bosses but not so good at killing large groups of content, then perhaps Trials of Tarya Gratar is better for you, versus if you are playing a speedrun build, then Expeditions, you're going to be able to blast through that content a lot faster, and then just, I would imagine by default, Expeditions are better. However, for the sake of preserving a apples to apples conversion, that's why I used the same build for both sides of the coin, so we could start drawing some parallels between the two. The link to the build is in the description of this video in case you actually want to check it out for yourself, but it is one that I have on the channel and have had on the channel for a while, so you should be familiar with it. Next, for testing, I wanted to compare an average hour of Trials of Tarya Gratar versus an average hour of Expeditions. In the case of Trials of Tarya Gratar, I was quite lucky. By the way, I'm going to just start referring to it as Trials right now from the rest of the video. I'm not going to say Tarya Gratar the whole time. But in the case of Trials, conveniently with the Eruption Pyro, I was able to string together 2 full runs in an hour, slightly going over my hour timer. And so I adjusted for this with the Expeditions as well. So we're basically looking at about 61-62 minutes compared to 61-62 minutes of each content on either side. Now, on the Trials side, what I chose as the route is the most effective or efficient straight shot through Trials from the beginning until the end, at least for me. And what this also entailed was actually using up all of your additional attempts on the second Arbiter at the end. So instead of abandoning the run after that first Arbiter kill, I would essentially rejoin in the other attempts, so another 3 times, equaling a full 4 Arbiter kills before basically starting the new run of Trials. So the route, as mentioned, would be the Mausoleum, going to the Courtyard, going to Plaza of the Worthy, going to the Vestibule, going to Throne Room, going to Father's Chambers, going to the Altar of Oakriel, going to the Great Well's Edge, then the Hall of Sculptures, the Antechamber, and finally Father's Sanctum, where you fight the second Arbiter and hitting that 4 times. So the first time when you get there, and then an additional 3 finishing up all of your attempts. Now your loot attempts, the times when you get loot on this particular run, is you get a chest in Mausoleum, you get rewards in Plaza of the Worthy, you get a chest in the Throne Room, you get rewards in Altar of Oakriel, you get a chest in Hall of Sculptures, and then you get 4 loot attempts on the second Arbiter, which means 4 choices of legendaries as well as whatever falls out of him. To establish a baseline for Trials, I ran it for 5 hours long, aka 10 attempts, and then I took the average of that, basically condensing down into 2 attempts or an hour. During this time, I recorded everything from drop pod resources, titanium, the quality of the items that dropped, whether they were apocalypse gear or not, things like how much anomaly extract as well as ascension XP, to really give us the all-round impression of what you get from a run of Trials or from an hour of Trials. On the other side of the coin, for the Expeditions, the hour of Expeditions, I picked 3 specific expeditions which I would target. My reasons for picking these 3 expeditions, which were Frontline, Stargrave, and Chemplan, is that all three of them are literally similar in terms of rewards that you get out of them, according to, or very close to each other in terms of rewards what you get. And they're also what I would consider medium expeditions, aka they don't require that much of a time investment, and also their finish times, regardless of which class you play, tends to generally be the same. In my case, my average was slightly more than 5 minutes. In some cases, for instance, Stargrave took a little bit longer than, for instance, Kempland, but generally speaking, all of them sort of hovered around 5 minutes. Likewise, in these activities, I recorded titanium, drop pod resources, anomaly extract, ascension XP, the quality of the items that dropped, and all of that. All of these tests, whether it was on the trial side as well as the expedition side, was done at Apocalypse level 40. Okay, so now that we've discussed exactly the parameters on both sides of them, what was the actual results? So if we stack the two up against each other, essentially what we see is that in an hour, on average, you can collect about 280k of titanium in trials. You can collect about 343k worth of drop pod resources. You can collect about 12k of anomaly extract. And last but certainly not least, you will amass about 22 million Ascension XP. Now again, because I was Apocalypse tier 40, it's not really possible for me to gauge Apocalypse level, but that also is difficult because Apocalypse level doesn't actually have a number associated, it's just a bar. However, I assume the two XP values are correlated between them, so 22 million XP for Ascension is probably 22 million XP for APOC as well. But in any case, I couldn't confirm nor test that, so for now we'll just keep Ascension XP as essentially the measurement. So that's everything that you get from a hour of trials. So an hour of running expeditions nets you 258k's worth of titanium, so a little bit less than what we get from trials. However, it nets you over 1 million of drop pod resources, which is huge compared to the drop pod resources that you get from an hour of running trials. Then in terms of anomaly extract, we get far less. We only get about 3,400 on average for an hour of expeditions versus the 12,000 that we see on the trial side. And last but not least, we get a fairly comparable level of Ascension XP, sitting at 21.7 versus the 22.8 that we see on the trial side. Now, item quality, basically let's distill it down to the overall amount of loot that you get. So for example, across the space of 2 runs of trials, aka an hour, you would be getting about 332 around the average pieces of gear. Now this is from the choices that you make at the end of the arbiter kills, as well as base epics, base legendaries, and apocalypse gear. Whereas if you're running an hour of expeditions, you're looking at about 271 pieces of gear. If we specifically zero in on apocalypse gear, in an average hour of trials, you're able to amass close to 160 pieces of apocalypse gear versus the less than 100, clocking in at about 90 to 95 pieces of apocalypse gear if you run expeditions. Now, an interesting fact that I actually want to point out is that we all know where PCF stands on the whole reusing your attempts at the end of a trials run to kill arbiter. They view this as an exploit and generally see this as people abusing the game to get additional loot, and to, in their eyes, an actual run of Trials of Tarya Gratar would mean going through trials until you get to the second arbiter, killing the second arbiter, and then essentially being done with the run. If we take that into account, and we only account for running up until the first arbiter kill and then quitting out of the trials run and then essentially starting a new one, we might actually be able to do a 2.5 runs of trials in an hour, but we will see a massive drop off in quality of gear as well as what we actually earn from that run, due to the fact that those final 4 kills of the arbiter, the second arbiter, are extremely lucrative for us in terms of like anomaly XP that we get, or rather anomaly extract that we get, but also the fact that we have 4 choices at different legendaries, as well as there being quite a lot of items actually dropping from just those 4 attempts. So interestingly enough, when we then start correlating this information and answering some important questions like which one is more lucrative than the other, we have to bear in mind one specific thing. If we play Trials of Tarya Gratar the way that PCF want us to do it, aka we don't abuse those final attempts on the Arbiter, then by far, for sure, expeditions are way better per hour than running Trials of Tarya Gratar. It's only when we actually include those additional attempts on the second Arbiter that Trials becomes more attractive in certain cases. Let's use this information then to answer some questions as to in which conditions Trials is better and which conditions expeditions are better. Question and answer 1. If you are looking for the maximum amount of drop pod resources that you can get in an hour, absolutely expeditions win hands down. If you are looking for the maximum amount of anomaly extract that you can get in an hour, absolutely Trials wins hands down. If you are looking for a massive amount of items, a massive amount of loot, then of course Trials wins again because there's simply just more of it. Bearing in mind, of course, that you have to be doing the exploit and playing where you actually consume those additional attempts and you don't quit after 1 kill on the Arbiter. If you quit after 1 kill of the Arbiter, then Expeditions wins hands down. In terms of Ascension XP, either one of the two is really okay. You will be earning about the same whether you're doing an hour of Expeditions versus an hour of Trials. And in terms of Titanium, I would say that kind of like, I mean, Titanium is directly also correlated to how much loot drops, because that loot you dismantle most likely, and you actually get the Titanium from that unless it's Apocalypse gear that you're dismantling. Again, I feel that comparing 258k versus 280k is not that big a difference. I don't think 30,000, or rather it's actually more like 20,000, is a massive difference. And so therefore, I think that doesn't really matter. So to summarize very shortly then, the bottom line is if you are looking to be as efficient as possible in gathering anomaly extract, you should be running Trials of Tarya Gratar because it far outnumbers the amount of anomaly extract that you can get from an equal amount of time from expeditions. Whereas the other way around is true for drop pod resources. If drop pod resources are the main resource that you're trying to get as much of, you are far better off just running as many expeditions, chaining them together as you can, because again, that amount, that yield far outnumbers what we can actually get from Trials of Tarya Gratar. Now, why is all this information important? And maybe to give some perspective on why I guess there are so many complaints about the general cost of upgrading your gear, and then of course that forcing people to try and find the most efficient way to gather those mats so that they can upgrade their gear. We simply have to look at how much it actually costs to upgrade a Apocalypse epic piece of gear from 74 to 75, where in this case we can see that this requires like 60k titanium, it requires basically 100k drop pod resources, and it requires 4,300 anomaly extract. Likewise, if we look at the same thing, but we talk about legendaries, you are looking at basically double that. So 120,000 titanium, about 200k drop pod resources, and a whopping 8,618 anomaly extract. So again, to correlate that to the information that we've just assembled, it means that essentially with every hour of expeditions, you won't even be able to, after running an hour of expeditions, you won't even be able to upgrade one epic Apocalypse item from 74 to 75. Whereas if you are running an hour of Trials, you will be able to upgrade one legendary and almost, I would say, yeah, basically almost also a epic item. So the point is that essentially again, if we're looking at the anomaly extract side of it, it is by far the most efficient to run Trials. I hope this information clears up some questions that some of you might have had on regarding exactly which one offers up as much. Of course, these are all average values, and these are all based on Apocalypse 40. So if you're playing on different Apocalypse levels, if you're taking longer or shorter to do some of these activities, your results will vary, but this kind of like puts a ballpark to essentially what you're looking at. As a final thought from me, I think the baseline here clearly shows that if you are looking to upgrade your gear, it is probably the most efficient to run Trials. However, if you aren't able to complete Trials, like for instance a Eruption Pyromancer is able to, in my opinion, do trials quite easily with almost no fear of dying due to the fast speed in which you're able to clear things and also to drop bosses, aka meaning less chance for you to die and having to replay things. Then trials is certainly a very attractive choice and probably the best way for you to go. If you aren't able to do trials that quickly, and certainly it gets more difficult the higher in Apocalypse tier you go, and if you're looking at essentially 45 to 50 minutes, something like that, to do one full trials run with the current build that you have, especially based on, you know, whichever Apocalypse tier you have, maybe you're even lower than Apocalypse 40, then it certainly would be in your interest to rather run expeditions due to the fact of expeditions just being so like no-brainer content, easy to do and everything like that. And even though it would take you over time more runs of expeditions to level out with the same amount of anomaly extract, you will be fucking drowning in drop pod resources, and generally you will just have a far easier time playing. I do, however, also think it's quite interesting that the only way how trials is actually lucrative and is actually worth running is if you do exploit the game and actually play counter to what PCF are expecting you to do in trials. I find that quite interesting because if they were to, for instance, nerf trials and they were to disable that you couldn't do these additional attempts, then there would literally be no reason to run trials because it would be dwarfed by how easy it is to run expeditions and rack up that material. Even if it takes you a little bit longer, it's far easier to do, and trials just wouldn't be worth the hassle. That's it for the video. Thank you so much for watching, especially if you made it this far. Let me know if you have any questions specifically regarding some of the parameters of the test things that I did. I hope I tried to explain everything as much as I could, and I tried to make it as, you know, clear and open as I could, but of course I could have missed something, and I'll be more than willing to answer any questions. Feel free to you know, ask me to test something else, or if there's something else that you're wondering about. I might have tested it already and just not made a video on it, or it might give me an idea of something that I can bring in the future that we can discuss together. But that's it. I said thanks already, so all that's left for me to do is say have a fantastic morning, afternoon, and evening wherever you are in the world, and until the next video, fucking cheers.
They want the best of me now, best of me now, best of me now, best of me. They want the best of me now, best of me now, best of me now, best of me.